Welcome back to the Israel Collective podcast. Today, I am so excited that you'll be hearing from our CUFI on Campus director, Kirby Calhoun.
What's up, Israel Collective?
What's good, IC?
Hey, IC fam.
This is Israel Collective.
Kirby, how's it going?
It is going. How are you doing, Destiny?
It is going indeed. It is going. I'm doing great, all things considered.
Yeah.
Watching American college campuses and wondering how did we get here, but we will get into that before we get into current events on American college campuses and why I'm so excited that you're the Israel Collective podcast guest this week. Could you tell us a bit about who is Kirby Calhoun and what is CUFI on campus?
Yeah. Well, Kirby Calhoun is just a normal dude. I'm a soldier, so I spent some time in Iraq and Afghanistan. I got out of the army, and really that's when I kind of found the Lord afterwards. And I've been chasing after Him ever since. And in my walk, of becoming a Christian and starting to go to church, in that process, I was introduced to CUFI through my church, and it just organically kind of happened for me. I know that this is where it's a trajectory I never would have thought God would have put me on with my background. However, it is one that it's very clear this is where He wanted me. And so while I was going to University of West Florida, I started up a CUFI on campus chapter there as the 30-year-old old dude. But we got it thriving, and it did really well. And then once I graduated, I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life, but I was still involved with CUFI. COVID happened. And so in the process of me asking about one of our summits, I applied for a job. And so I ended up working with CUFI. And so before the campus position, I worked as a ministry engagement coordinator with CUFI National. And just this past December is when I took over the director for the campus role.
Nice. Can you tell us a bit about CUFI on campus, which I'm a product of, by the way, for everyone listening. And that's why I am so glad to be a part of the CUFI on campus, support system at CUFI, and really thrilled about everything Kirby's working on there. But can you tell us a bit about that program?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, CUFI on campus is designed to educate Christians on college campuses, is to, remind them what the Bible says, but then also help them understand the educational and the academic aspects. Like, Israel is defendable in an academic setting. You just have to know the information. And so we try our best to present that information and teach these students the truth about Israel. And also on top of that, we have this advocacy aspect after October 7th, where we're really trying hard to teach our Christian students how to show the love of Christ on campus. And even when it's super convenient or inconvenient, when it's hard to do, is often the time that it's most needed. And this is kind of where we are. And so, the CUFI on campus program, we are designed to educate these students, one, why they need to be bold Christians, help edify that education by taking them to Israel. We bring them to Washington, D.C., so they get to go on to Capitol Hill. They experience the entire American way of life from a faith-based perspective and get a chance to engage in it and go to Israel and see why it matters to the United States of America from several perspectives. And then to be able to come on campus and then send our coordinators there to meet with them and help them become advocates, build relationships with the Jewish students on campus. Because right now, this is not just about hating Israel. This has become personal. This is about the Jewish students on each individual campus now. And so, that advocacy is needed. And that's what we're here for, is to answer that call.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I am 100% a product of CUFI on campus. Similar to you, I grew up in a church where my pastor was involved, but so I first heard about CUFI and learned about CUFI from CUFI having investments in pastor and investing in pastors and connecting with local churches. But when I very first graduated high school, I was someone that CUFI on campus poured into. I went to the student advocacy leadership training in January 2012, I think, after my first semester of college. I went to the CUFI summit. I went on the Israel trip. It wasn't called the Bonhoeffer Fellowship at the time. It was even before the Bonhoeffer Fellowship, but that was the first time I ever went to Israel, was with CUFI on campus. I was inspired. I was equipped. I was mobilized to stand with Israel, to stand with the Jewish people. And we need more Destinies and Kirbys right now. And that's what you and I have been working really hard to put our hands to. And our incredible CUFI and campus staff have been working very hard to put our hands to. So the last 6 months have been very challenging to be pro-Israel on campus. I mean, it has never been a walk in the park to be a Zionist on American college campuses, most American college campuses, but especially the last 6 months, it has been incredibly challenging to be pro-Israel on American college campuses. The last 10 days have been absolutely insane, absolutely chaotic. What can you tell us about what's been going on?
There's a lot to dive in there. So I would say where to begin. October 7th was a humanitarian's worst nightmare. I mean, the worst things that can happen to human beings happened while they were being filmed and live streamed and paraded around. And, I think that a lot of what we're seeing now, the anti-Semitism, because I believe a lot of it is underlying anti-Semitism. And I think that it's always been there. There's always been a portion of society, no matter where you're at, that's going to find a reason to blame the Jewish people for things. But this time it's different because it's cloaked in this they're using this anti-Israel rhetoric, but they're targeting individual Jewish people with that rhetoric. And they're trying to say that it's not anti-Semitic to come against Israel, but but then they also think that it's okay to stand on campus and say, from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. And then half these students don't even know which river they're talking about. And this is part of the problem is our students in America are hungry to be on the right side of history. They want to be seen as humanitarians. They want to be seen as people that care about others.
Yep.
And what happened, in my opinion, is a successful propaganda campaign run by Hamas has infiltrated our college campuses.
Right.
And again, it may have started about, well, this is about Israel. This is about what Israel's doing. But these same people that want to talk about the, Palestinian civilians that are being killed in these military operations will not condemn Hamas.
Right.
So how do we explain, and when I try to logically have dialogue with these students, it's like, look, why was Israel there in the first place? You have to backtrack it. But then it always comes down to this, well, Israel is this colonial entity and they've always been wrong and they've always been oppressive. And because of that, everything is justified. That happened on October 7th. And I have to say that because this really is the dangerous part of the rhetoric when you start to hear it. When it starts to become not only okay, but a release of justification to be able to sleep better at night, to say that, well, what Hamas did was not only okay, or it was not, not even be able to not condemn it, but inherently to say that it is actually justified what they did. It all boils all down to Jew hatred, especially on our campuses. So you have to understand what's happening there, what happened, to understand why there are emotions here. So we are having a humanitarian crisis in Gaza Strip. And we're having two narratives being argued over. One, that Israel is the aggressor and doing everything wrong and killing civilians. And then you have people like me that are like, we have a terrorist organization that for almost 20 years has been in charge of government of these people. So this is not a friendly area. This is a terrorist-run area. These civilians have been subjugated and subject to that kind of rule for almost 2 decades now, when Israel unilaterally pulled out of there. And so now what do we see on campuses? We're seeing hatred. We're seeing all of these historical things, most of it in ignorance, being used to justify extreme action. And so Colombia, it started off with peaceful protests, if you want to call them that. It starts off with a flyer. It starts off with a couple people picketing,
Mm-hmm.
but then that emotionalism starts to rise. You start to build emotions in people who do not understand the historical truth, and they hitch themselves to that wagon. And this is
Mm-hmm.
what's happening on campus. We have college students, like I said, who don't know which river or which sea they're talking about,
Right.
but that are holding signs that say from the river to the sea. And in their mind, they think that means freedom for the Palestinians. They refuse to see that that actually is calling for the death of the Jews.
Right.
And if I was to go on a college campus right now, and or any campus really, but if you see somebody walk on with a KKK hood talking about lynching people,
Not a
there's
good look.
there's one justified reaction,
Right.
right? And we know what that is. There's
Right.
one, and it's you deserve the law and the fullest extent of the law,
Absolutely.
because you are absolutely violating what people are saying are First Amendment rights. It's not a First Amendment right to stand up and say, I want to kill all of you. If somebody walks up to you on the street and says, I want to kill you, you have two options. You don't have to believe them, or you do have to believe them.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that the Jewish people take this so seriously is because historically, when people have told them that they want to kill them, even if it takes decades for that to come to pass, it comes to pass.
Right.
They have learned that when someone says they want to kill you, you should listen to them,
Mm-hmm.
and you should not give them the advantage to do so, and trust that they're going to make a decision in the future that cares about your general welfare or well-being.
Totally.
And this is this is kind of what we're seeing, and it's hard because Israel's a complicated topic.
Right.
It's a lot to unpack, but most of these students aren't actually unpacking the topic.
Mm-hmm.
They're jumping on a bandwagon of something they don't understand, and they don't understand. And the hardest part for me, Destiny, is I've dealt with radical groups like Hamas. I've personally interrogated Al-Qaeda fighters. So I have dealt with people who have looked me in the face and said, if you handcuff me now, I'll kill you right here. It's ideological hatred. It doesn't have to have an explanation. It just is what it is. Western society doesn't understand this, but Israel does,
Mm-hmm.
because Israel is surrounded by these ideological hatreds. And my opinion is that the United States should support an ally that understands an enemy that we spent 2 decades fighting.
Right.
And what we're seeing on campus now, Columbia, it is spreading. It's turning to hate speech, and it's turning it started with what I would say radical, maybe protected First Amendment speech, but it's turning into radical hate speech, which inevitably turns into violence.
Right.
And we're already seeing that.
Yeah.
Violence is the outcome. And that's why we have to stand up against it. You cannot be idle. You can't be quiet, because whether you want it to come to your campus or not, it's coming.
Right. Right. Well, and I think, Kirby, so many things that you said there, I want to respond to, that you and I could just go all day. You and I are both talkers. But it says everything. It says everything that these campus activists are unable to condemn Hamas. That tells you everything you need to know. Everything. The protests, the encampments at Columbia University, what are they saying? They're saying globalize the Intifada. They're
Right.
saying long live the Intifada. That's a call to terrorism. That's a call to suicide bombings in restaurants, cafes, public transportation. They're saying we will repeat October 7th. That's another incitement to violence. That is raping, murdering, torturing, kidnapping men, women, children, the elderly, the disabled. The list really goes on. They're telling us who they are. They're telling us what they stand for. I mean, I said earlier at the beginning of this conversation, I said it has always been challenging to be pro-Israel on college campuses. Yes, but when I was in college 10 years ago, the pro-Palestine side, they wanted to distance themselves from terrorism. They weren't pro-Hamas. They wanted to distance themselves from Hamas. Right. We aren't seeing that anymore. We're seeing an embrace of Hamas. We're seeing a celebration of terrorism and a justification of this is resistance. It's,
Yeah, no,
you know,
I talked to, I actually debated an SJP group that came to try to knock down one of our meetings
hmm
at some point, and they called Hamas. Now this was pre-October 7th, but they called Hamas a group of freedom fighters. And it's heartbreaking because these are young American students that don't understand what's really happening.
hmm
And I know just enough about radical ideologies to know that they should never be in charge of governing civilians and innocent people. But to call Hamas a group of freedom fighters, like I told this group of students, is like, if you can name another group of freedom fighters that rapes and murders women and children as a means of achieving their military objectives, like, I'll sit down and be quiet right now.
hmm,
But the reality is, freedom fighters don't do that. They're trying to overthrow oppression. They're not targeting civilians, because that's not how you do that.
right,
Now, terrorists, that is what terrorists do, because what is the point of terrorism? To impact you in a way that they can live in your head rent free.
right,
And so, and going back to your intifada statement, people don't understand. They're holding signs talking about intifadas. Like, these are cowards that strapped bombs to themselves that went on school buses. This is the intifada.
hmm
This is going to Starbucks and having somebody come blow you up because you just happen to be somewhere in a place that they think is radicalized. Like, it defies ration and logic, which is how we know it's emotion, and we know that it's ignorance. And those are very dangerous things to have combined with one another.
totally,
Um,
totally,
but these students don't understand. And this is, it's not a First Amendment right to stand up and call for the death of people. If I want to stay up, now I will say frankly, I appreciate when somebody who disagrees with me ideologically, I like knowing that up front.
hmm
If you hate me because I'm white, or you hate me because I'm tall, that's fine. Tell me straight up. I know where your heart's at.
right,
The moment that conversation shifts to, I can't wait to kill you, long live killing all tall people, it's different.
right,
You're now threatening my life. Every time I see you, I remember those words, and I wonder if today is the day that those words become action in his
right,
heart. And every Jewish student on every campus in this country right now probably has to worry about that, or some version of that.
right,
They have to, in the back of their minds, wonder, at what point does this loud rhetoric turn extremely violent? And we're already seeing it on several campuses.
right,
But then what's next after violence? And this is what
hmm
happens if left unchecked. Now, thank
hmm
God, there are people starting to stand up and they're starting to do things. But why have students been allowed for weeks
right,
to do this?
right, right,
It's heartbreaking,
right.
but it's rooted in ignorance.
Yeah. Well, and there's a double standard, right? So if this was targeted towards any other community, we would not tolerate it. Remember
Right,
during COVID, there was a huge campaign to stop Asian hate, right? Because
yeah,
we understood that blaming Chinese people for COVID incited violence against them. We understood that there was a link between offensive behavior, offensive attitudes, offensive speech turning into hate speech, turning into violence.
right,
We understood that clearly. And there was so much support for the Asian community when they were experiencing violence from people with these views, right? So, why is it such a stretch? Why is it asking so much that students on American college campuses that are openly supporting terrorists, why is it asking so much for them to be taken seriously?
yeah,
It really isn't. It
I
really
know,
isn't. And as hard as it is for other people to understand, maybe Ivy League university presidents don't understand. Thank God our students understand.
yeah,
Thank
and
God CUFI on campus students understand that supporting terrorism is bad, supporting democracy in the Middle East is good.
yeah,
And
right,
like, I didn't know that made you a genius in 2024, but thank God I know some.
right,
Thank God that we're investing in hundreds of college students to come to our summit this July. Thank God we're bringing college students to Israel in August. Thank God we're hiring more staff to meet this need, because I know our students, Christian students on college campuses, They are an answer to prayer of many Jewish students, of many Jewish parents. I have friends who have children that are Jewish high school students getting ready to go into college, and they're like, I don't know what I'm gonna do for my kids. I don't know like what the answer is here. And I'm like, you know, as terrible and as scary as things look like on these college campuses, we are investing so much in the next generation of Christian support for Israel. And we say
Right.
next generation, but they're really, the next generation of America, but they're really leaders of their generation now,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know,
That whether they want to be or not.
whether they want to be or not.
Because this is, we are, I'm a believer that God's going to hold us accountable for the things that we do and we don't do.
Yeah.
And this is inconvenient, and let's be real, like this is inconvenient for everybody taking classes. It's inconvenient for the parents, and inconvenient is the nicest word. It's downright terrifying for some students and their families. But I think about, I'm a historian. I love to read history. And I think about World War II, and I think about the journey before the concentration camps. And like, when you look back on it, you can clearly see these mile markers of things that happened before extreme violence is accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And, protesting and blaming Jews on college campuses was something Nazis did too.
Wow.
It has to be taken in historical context.
Yeah.
Now, that does not mean that everybody protesting is a Nazi. But, at some point, critical thinking has to apply on an individual basis. Don't let people tell you what to think. Because your friend is holding a picket sign does not mean your friend knows what they're talking about.
Right.
And a real friend who knows the truth does not allow their friend to walk out into traffic.
Right.
Right? If you know the truth, you are responsible to share that truth. And the reality is that it was inconvenient for the Christians in Germany too. And they let it go. And there's a reason that we know a pastor like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, but I don't know the names of however many thousands of others.
Wow.
Did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we remember the people that did the right thing when we look back, and I look back even to the biblical story of the 12 spies. No one knows the names of the 10 who came back with a negative report. Everyone knows Joshua and Caleb because they came back and they said, yeah, they're giants, but we've got this because God has our back.
Right.
He's told us that we can do this, and therefore we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the confidence that our Christian students need to have. God is with you on this. And it doesn't matter if you're standing alone on your campus. It's like that Elijah moment or Elisha where, he reveals his servant's eyes and he opens his servant's eyes and he sees the chariots of fire.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those that are with us are greater than those that are with them. We need to reflect Christ the best way possible on these campuses. That is, and that's in many ways. One, presenting truth, even when it's hard to do, even in an academic setting, even when your professor is going to rebut you, because this is what happened when I went to school.
Right.
Professors say things, and just because they have a PhD does not mean that they know everything.
Yep.
And doggone, you are allowed to question stuff and critically think for that $90,000 degree that you're getting.
Right.
So ask the questions. Don't let people tell you something that you know is not true. Trust the word of God. Come to Israel with us. If you're a college student, go to Israel and get off the plane. And within 30 minutes, you know that the apartheid argument is dead in the water.
Yeah.
It's downright laughable.
Yeah.
And yet we have students on our college campuses right now holding signs.
Right.
That call Israel an apartheid state.
Right.
And this is what those expensive degrees are getting them. And so Christians have a responsibility within society to stand up and do what is right. That means speaking truth. And two, that means loving your neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if I love my neighbor, I'm not going to let someone else come into his house and rob him and beat him up and call him racial slurs and turn him into an other in society to justify the actions against them.
Right.
If I love my neighbor, I'm going to not let that happen. And it doesn't matter if they're Jewish or not, but it especially applies to the Jewish people because like you and I have already talked about, for some reason, it's okay for most of these folks to call for the death of the Jewish people.
Right.
It would not be acceptable for anyone else, but for the Jewish people, the standard is not the same. And this is the whole argument, and even college professors that I've debated, it's a double standard. And it is easy to highlight that you don't hold any other country to the standard you hold Israel to, and you only hold Israel to that standard because you don't like Israel. And you
Mhm.
need to hold them to that standard because it justifies your thought processes and the
Mhm.
hatred in your heart that you
Yeah.
have for them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I used to travel with Irving Roth,
Hmm.
for those who don't know, Irving Roth was a Holocaust survivor. He recently passed in the last couple of years, but I used to travel with him when I was a CUFI and campus coordinator, and I heard him say once, Israel is the Jew of the world. And I didn't really understand what he meant by that. But
Yeah.
now I totally understand, as Israel is the only Jewish state on the stage of the world, if you are an anti Semite, it
Right.
isn't kosher, for lack of better phrasing. It isn't, appropriate to say in 2024, Jews kill uh, Jews kill Christian babies and use their blood for matzah, right? That's blood libel. That sounds crazy. That sounds absolutely deranged. That's obviously anti-Semitic and wrong. But it's way more palatable to say Israel kills Palestinian children,
Right.
or Israel kills Palestinian prisoners and harvests their organs. That is a real conspiracy about Israel.
Hmm.
It's insane. It's disgusting.
Yeah. It
Or
is.
that Jews learned how to commit a genocide in the Holocaust, and they're now inflicting a genocide on the Palestinians because they have trauma from the Holocaust. That is a real that is a real talking point from the anti-Israel
Yeah.
crowd, right? So
Crazy.
so just Israel becomes a euphemism for the word Jew,
Mhm.
and somehow that's more palatable because we're talking about Israel, and these anti-Semitic tropes and anti-Semitic stereotypes become cloaked in criticism of Israeli policy or
Right.
criticism of the Israeli military, and it's disgusting. I could talk
Yeah.
about that all day long.
Yeah. No, but that's kind of what I was trying to touch on earlier
Yeah,
was that it's hidden under anti-Israel rhetoric.
exactly.
And that's being allowed to expound, and it's coming down to the individual. It's Jewish individuals on campus that are being assaulted.
Exactly.
They may not
Wonder
even be
why.
offended. Yeah, they
Yeah,
may not be pro-Israel. They may not even like certain parts about Israel, but because they're Jewish,
right,
it's automatically assumed that certain things, and they're being treated a certain way. I mean, it's
right.
it's discrimination. It's wrong. I mean,
Yeah,
everything about it is wrong. And the one of the most disheartening parts about this is just from the American perspective. Like, you're hearing "death to America" at some
right,
of these places.
right.
And I'm telling students, like, look, if you don't know whether or not you are on the right side of history, put some earplugs in when you walk past the rally, take a picture of the rally, go
Mm-hmm.
back to your dorm room, and in the silence of your room, look at that picture. And if you see stuff like "From the River to the Sea," or you see swastikas, you are not on the right side of history.
Yep.
And it will take all the emotion out of it. Like, they're not hiding it. And this
Right.
is what I'm saying. It's elevating to a point where people are openly coming forward and saying they're not even hiding it behind anti-Israel rhetoric anymore.
Mm-hmm.
This is about the Jews now. And again, there's signs that are clearly saying this at many of these protests. And it's sad, it's disheartening. Nobody should have to live this way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's really disgusting. I think just the fact that people call the Jewish people Nazis or Israel
Oh.
Nazis, the way that they slur the Jewish people,
Mm-hmm.
it's just it's heartbreaking and disgusting. And
Mm-hmm.
my heart breaks for these students,
Yeah.
because who wants to pay money to go to a school to have to worry about this?
Right.
Like, you're paying for this,
Right.
and you're being forced to endure this. And I'm so proud of our students. We have college students all over the country. They're doing everything that they can. Whether they are using their voice, they're going to Shabbat dinners. They're going to these BDS rallies where they're trying to get underhanded BDS votes done in the middle of the night on a college campus that has no bearing on any war whatsoever, but calling for a ceasefire. It doesn't even make sense, but it's happening. And we have students going to those rallies or going to those hearings and speaking up for Israel and standing with the Jewish people. And that's what we need to do. It's not about being louder. It's about making sure that our neighbors and that our Jewish brothers and sisters know that they're not alone. Like right now, to me, that is the most important thing. Our law, these schools, I think it's naturally going to progress what we're seeing. The police are going to come in at some point, they disperse everything, and then the legal showdown is going to happen afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
But the Jewish people, that fear that they had going onto that campus, how do you take that from them? And if it can happen once, why can't it happen again?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're susceptible to believe that lie, how do I know you won't believe the next lie that comes out? And just from the soldiering perspective, I've told people till I'm blue in the face. Like, if you cannot understand the fact that Hamas could stop the killing of its own people right now, this moment, simply by answering the ceasefire that's on the table.
Right.
That's all they have to do. Give up the hostages. American hostages, by the way. Americans, by the way. Not just Israelis. American hostages. But they're not. No one's condemning Hamas. No one's calling for the release of hostages. They only care about the civilians dying in Gaza. I care about those civilians too, as a Christian. Israel is not at fault for those civilians. Hamas is.
Right.
Hamas built their terror tunnels under hospitals, not Israel. Hamas came in, raped and murdered babies and women, not Israel. Israel's responding to this terrorist threat, and these terrorists now are living in residential neighborhoods and hiding behind their own people.
Right.
That's the truth. And so Israel is losing soldiers trying to secure places in Gaza Strip to allow Palestinians to leave and move from one area to the next. They're losing troops doing it. And they don't have to, but they want to, because the world's blaming them for stuff that they're not doing, but they have to take those steps to do the right thing by the people there, because they know, like Desi, Israel's in it for the long haul. They've always wanted to move peaceably with the Palestinians.
Right.
And the evidence and the peace treaties that have been on the table several times in history prove that. And so, it's unfortunate. But I think our students on campus, they just have to keep their resolve. We stand on the truth. Israel doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to agree with everything that they do to say that they're a free country. They should have a right, just like we have a right, to vote their own people in and to do business their way. It's their neighborhood. It's not ours.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to your point, I am so thankful for our students. Like, it's one thing to say, I stand with Israel. It's one thing to say, I'm a friend of the Jewish community. But our students are, one, they're saying those things on social media. They're saying those things to their Jewish peers on campus. But they're also showing up when the going gets tough. They're showing up. They're standing shoulder to shoulder with their Jewish peers. And at the end of the day, that is the most important. Christians and Jews working together at every level, whether that's campus, whether that's, in the community, whether that's in the halls of Congress, getting work done to support Israel and support the Jewish people. That's what we're working towards, and that's what our students are working on. And I'm enormously proud of them, because you don't have to be Jewish to stand strong against anti-Semitism. You don't have to be Jewish to be a friend of the Jewish people. And actually, our students just last week, this is the last week of April that we're talking about, we published a open letter that they had signed. We got over 100 students' names, signed this open letter saying, we see what's happening on American college campuses, and we are standing strong with Israel. We're standing strong with the Jewish community, and we are committed. We are committed to making sure other people are standing strong as well. We're committed to challenging our peers beyond the Jewish community to stand up against anti-Semitism.
Right.
Enormously proud of CUFI on campus.
Big time. And one more thing about these students that I want to say is they're fearless. So there's this misconception that as Christians, because we're quiet, we're afraid. And that's not the case. Our students have no desire to go stand up in front of a bunch of bullies that are going to yell at them and throw stuff at them. But what they're doing is making a difference.
Right.
And they have the courage. I mean, they are very courageous. It's, and it's very encouraging to me to see these young people step up to the plate when it really matters, you know,
Right.
and it reminds me of that Esther story, you know, what a time, you know, and I can only imagine her being in that position and, you know, what do you do? And then you get this information and how inconvenient it is to know that I could be killed for going to make this request.
Mhm.
But if I don't, I'm going to die anyways, and my people will all perish.
Right.
And so I have no option. And she did it. She had the courage to step in and do what was right. And look what happened. She saved all of her people,
Mhm.
or God saved her people through her. But it's because of that courage. And that's what I'm seeing in these students. It is that gentle firmness that Christ allows. And when you know that you're standing on truth, it just makes standing on that truth much easier to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Kirby, thank you so much for joining us this week. I really loved our conversation. For anyone who wants to know more about CUFI on campus and what they're up to, you can visit CUFI, CUFI on campus.org. Be sure to follow their Instagram pages and their Twitter. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time.
We want to thank you so very much for joining us on this episode of the Israel Collective Podcast.
We invite you to continue the conversation with us. Stay connected by subscribing, share your insights by commenting, and don't forget to be a light in the darkness.
So once again, like, subscribe, and smash that notification bell so you get all the information from us.